Hold up, hold up, hold up. It's that boy G Planz. Don't give a damn. He cooler than a fan. Walking real tall. Some say he's a man.
So what's going on, man?
Hey man,
Anton, aka Bruce Wayne, talk to me, man. How you feeling? We in Dallas, Texas right now.
man, I'm feeling good, man. We just coming off Juneteenth, celebrating that holiday today, Father's Day.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling good, man. We've come a long way, but we still got some work to go, man. We got work to be done, So we free, but that don't mean we ain't got no work to be done. We have some work, and everybody can contribute to putting that work in.
You're right, man. You're right. First, I want to say I appreciate you giving me your time and for me to even get you on my platform.
Ah, man, it's an honor. It's an honor.
Man, my cousin, he's been talking about you all weekend. So, man, you got to get the Bruce Wayne. You got to get the Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
So I go and I'm looking. Let me check this guy out. Let me see what he got going on. I see Antong Lucky.
Yeah.
So I want to know, before we even get into the interview,
Right.
how did you decide, or why did you decide to name yourself Bruce Wayne when your name is Antong Lucky?
Man, you know what? Ain't nobody never asked me that on camera, but this is gonna be the first time that I answer this on camera. Okay, just a little history about me, right? I'm born and raised in Dallas, right? And before, early on, man, I was a factor here in Dallas. I did some work. I put some work in. We ain't gonna talk about that, but I did a lot of work, right? And so I had a name in the streets, et cetera, right? But I ended up in prison. I was one of the ones that's credited with starting the first blood gang here in Dallas. And I put in a lot of work, et cetera, but I ended up in prison, right? And so it was in prison that I began to make this transformation, right? I began to be very self-introspective, really dealing with myself, a lot of brothers, it's hard for brothers to take this journey, but I think it's a necessary journey, right? But I was in prison, right? And I never forget, I was standing in front of a judge expecting to go home, and he said, "You're a menace to society," right? And at the same time, I was having a conversation in my head, and I was like, "But Judge, you don't understand, man. I'm from East Dallas. It's tough in East Dallas, man. You got to be a certain way to make it out of East Dallas. You got to really do as they do in East Dallas, but that's not really who I am, right?" And all these words were going in my head, but it never came out my mouth. But as I walked from that courtroom, man, I was thinking like, damn, like how in the hell I go from being an A honor roll student, a talented, gifted student, to a judge calling me a menace to society? And I wanted the answer to that. I really wanted the real answer to that, man. Because I remember walking out the courtroom looking at my mother's face and the disappointment that she had on her face, right? 2 weeks prior, May 7th, I had just had a daughter, my first daughter, right? And I'm thinking about my daughter, saying to myself, I don't want to be to my daughter what my father was to me. My father did 37 years flat. From the time I was 9 months to 37, he was in prison. And I remember how I felt as a kid, right? So I got that going on in my mind. I'm asking the question, like, how this judge called me a menace to society, right? Because I put in some work. I did some stuff in the streets. I was in the drug gang, all that good stuff. But prior to that, I was a honor roll student. I was a talented, gifted student, right? And I wanted to know the answers to that. I want to know, why did I amputate my personality and become somebody else? I wanted the answers. And so as I was going to prison, I became self-introspective, and I had to trace and track where I got off track at, right? Why that prior to prison, that I was living this persona, I was putting in where I was making the choices that I was making, right? And so as I did that, I began to look in the mirror and I began to question myself. And I had to accept what I saw in that little stainless steel mirror. I had to be accountable. I remember when I was going into prison, Tupac had just released this song called Live and Die in L.A.
And about what year was this?
This was in 1996. Yeah, this was 1996. Tupac had a song. Tupac was a prophet. Everything Tupac said, Tupac spoke for us. He spoke eloquently to our issues that we were dealing with in that era. And so I remember a song that he had. It was called Live and Die in L.A. And the words went like, learn about the West Coast B's and C's. The mother dudes, copycats, D's to G's, right? And I remember, man, them words pierced my heart, man. They pierced me. Because as I was coming into this new me and this new transformation and being accountable to everything that happened, all the decisions that I made up until that point, one decision that I had to deal with was the fact that my neighborhood was the first neighborhood to become Bloods in Dallas, right?
And what neighborhood was that?
It's East Dallas, 415. And it was the first Blood gang in Dallas, et cetera, et cetera. It was no other such thing as Bloods. It was all Crips. No such thing, right? And I remembered, right, when Tupac said that line, I remember thinking to myself that we watch Colors, right? That's West Coast. We watched Colors and we emulated what they were doing. You know, you seen Hot Top and all them on Colors. We saw it at the movies. We instinctively knew that the enemy or the rivals to the Crips were the Bloods. And so one day after a lot of stuff had happened, me and a couple of my cousins said, we're going to be the Bloods, right? And there was no such thing. And we said, we're going to be the deadliest, ruthless gang in this city. And we lived up to that, right? But when Tupac said that, I reverted back to that day that we decided to be Bloods. And I remember the conversation. It was around, you know, Colors. It was around, because gangbanging wasn't a Texas thing. That was a California thing. And so imagine me, right, going into prison as the leader of the Bloods, right? This is how I went into prison like that, as the leader of the Bloods. And it came with the perks. It came with people who looked at you almost as a celebrity, people who just want to do anything, would do anything that you ask them to do because they wanted your good grace. I went into prison like that. But I was still questioning, how in the hell did I get to this point? So it made me unlayer and unravel a lot of stuff that I had accepted, that a lot of stuff that I piled on me, right? And so in prison, I began to unlayer that, right? And I denounced my gang affiliation in prison. And that's just something you don't do, because you need the gang for protection. But I was so convicted, bro, about doing what's right and accepting my stuff, that if I was willing to die for a color or die for doing something wrong, I would have to make the same commitment about doing something right. And so me shedding that whole gang with Sana and all that good stuff after I had put in so much work was only necessary for me, because I wanted to be better when I came out of prison, because I thought about my daughter who I was leaving behind, you know. I thought about my daughter now in her formative years of life. She's not gonna have a dad. And then I remembered how I felt. I remember how I felt growing up as a kid without my dad being present and not knowing who I was, you know, et cetera, right? And so that was the impetus for me to change a lot of things that I was dealing with. And I was willing to do that. I was willing to be very transparent and vulnerable with what I saw in that little stainless steel mirror. I was willing to be that and do that because I wanted to be different. Because I felt like I failed being sinners and going into prison. I feel like I failed my family. I failed my mother, my siblings that needed me. And so I wanted to do something different, right? And so fast forwarding, getting out of prison. I ain't gonna tell you about my prison unless you want to know it.
We gotta talk.
You want to talk about that?
We gonna talk about everything, but go in about why we went.
Okay, and so when I got out of prison, I made a transformation in prison, right? You know, I was like that butterfly. I mean, I was that caterpillar that went in that cocoon. And when I came out, I was butterfly, and I was seriously butterfly. But when I came out, right, I wanted to help my neighborhood. I wanted to stop young brothers, young boys from making the decision that I made, that they had to choose the gang versus education or being entrepreneurs, et cetera, et cetera. I want to change that, because when you looked around the country, this all you saw. You seen prison and gangs and drugs as a rites of passage for our people. And I want to change that, right? And I knew the only way you can change it, you have to be an example. You had to be the example of the embodiment of change. So I said I was going to be the epitome, the embodiment of change, right? So when I got out of prison, I went to my neighborhood and I said, I want to change this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But every time I would meet somebody, because they didn't know the change that happened in prison, they knew who I used to be. And so when I meet somebody anywhere and they be like, when I say my name, they got some story attached with my name, like people that I didn't know. They were everywhere I went, and I met people. They knew a story. Either they knew it personally or indirectly, where somebody else said it. And I could never get a footing, right? I could never get a footing because that connotation was, that cloud was over me.
Yeah.
And so I said, man, I got to do something different. And so, man, I thought about, when I was thinking about what moniker that I was going to use for myself, I was very, very impressed with Bruce Wayne, Batman.
Okay.